Addison Trail is celebrating their 50 years. We're all excited to bring you some perspectives from a faculty standpoint. Stay tuned to watch some of the activities that they participated in. Hi, once again, I'm Burke McDonald. I was a guidance director and the counselor at Addison Trail High School. We're celebrating the 50th year of Addison Trail High School, and we're going to talk a little bit about what it was like to teach at Addison Trail over the course of the years. We've got some new people at the table. Some are fairly young compared to some of the other of us that have been at Addison Trail a longer time. And I apologize if hopefully I didn't embarrass you with that. Next to me is Chuck Morgan. He was a social studies teacher. He was also a coach and a department chairman at one point. Dan Jarris, many people may know him. He was involved with many of the activities, and he was a social studies teacher. Jim Mortier, I'm sure a lot of them in the community know him. He was at Addison Trail for many years as a principal, coach, PE teacher, and so on. Nina Pulliam. She used to pull together the yearbooks, and she was an English teacher. And anything else that you did while you were there? Those are your main, that's, doing the yearbook takes...
Well, I only did that, 5 years?
Is that all? Oh, I thought it was longer than that.
Somebody else to do it for a while.
And over here we have Rick Howitt. Rick Howitt, many of you may remember as being a basketball coach. And he was a social studies teacher at Addison Trail for many years. And Addison Trail is 50 years old now, so there's been a lot of changes that have gone on. We talked a little bit about the beginning and what it was like for the first couple years. Is there anything that you guys that were there at the beginning that want to add to what we've already said, but this time from the point of view of a teacher?
Well, I think the discipline at the time was very strict. We were backed up by everybody and so on, and even the parents. And the faculty at the time, I think, was very much together. We had a good time together and all kind of stuck together.
Okay. Dinah?
Yes.
You said you came from a small community and you liked the way everybody worked.
Well, I wasn't a small community, but I liked the way the unity. I liked the fact that we all sort of worked together. I mean, I had a freshman class who wanted to know who the principal was, and I told them Dr. Cook, and the reply was, why would a doctor want to be a principal? And then somebody says, he must have been a pediatrician. And so I went down and I told him that's what was going on, and he came up and sat. We had a circle, and he sat and talked to the kids the whole period, and even got into talking English and the importance of teaching English, and it was kind of fun.
Because he was an English teacher, right?
He was an English teacher.
At one point. Rick, what was it like? You came in, the whole place was going along pretty well and chugging along. I know when I came in, I was pretty impressed with how Addison Trail, I got there in 1970. What was it like for you when you joined the faculty?
Yeah, I came in '74, so I think, I came lucky enough. I went into the social studies department, and to me, that was just always a tremendous department, and the camaraderie was fabulous. And I know, kind of later in my career, I started teaching a few classes that tailored up with the English department, and it just seemed like it was a seamless joining of those two departments. The camaraderie was excellent in the English department. It was great in social studies, and people would come and go. Charlie was always there, and Dan was always there. But it just seemed whoever came in, everybody did their job. But we had a lot of fun, and Charlie and I, a couple years, I know we'd eat our lunch very quick if we had the same lunch period. And we'd get in the department for about 15 minutes, play a very challenging cribbage game. And Charlie won, I would say. I always thought it was a game of luck, but he won about 95% of the time. So
science and skill versus ignorance and superstition.
I still have that sign, I think.
Well, you mentioned people coming and going. I know when we first started, I came in 1970, and there were some teachers that came in around that time or a little bit thereafter, and the Vietnam War was going on. And people got called into the service, and they would be gone for 2, 3, 4 years, whatever their stint was in the military, and then they came back. Bob Megenberg is one.
And that's how I got my job.
That's how you
I
got your-
replaced Bob Megenberg. when he got
Okay,
called.
and weren't there a couple other teachers at that, or was he the only one at that?
He's the only one that I recall.
Okay. But I know back in those days, it wasn't just Addison Trail, but people would go and then come back to because the rules were, obviously, you were able to come back to your job, no matter whether it was in schools or in industry and so on. What was it like for you when you joined then?
Well, it was a bit different in the sense that I started in the middle of the year because Bob had been called back to, well, not back to, but to Clinton because the draft board needed another body. So I started in the middle of a year, and I remember walking into the building during Christmas break, and it was, of course, very quiet, and met the department chair at that time, John Barland, and then he took me into Dr. Cook's office. But I was really thankful for that camaraderie that was able to move into the department pretty easily, and a lot of support and a lot of help. And very similar to what other people experienced. I was fortunate to teach American Studies and Latin American Studies several years with people from other departments. And that's a theme, I think, running through here. A lot of supportive faculty
Yeah,
helping each other
you
out.
were one that was really very much into trying to work and collaborate with other departments so that they weren't just learning social studies, they were learning other things also and seeing how things blended together.
Exactly. So American Studies, the notion of American culture, and why did authors write their particular things at particular moments in history, and how do those things fit together, and expand it to art and music and other elements of culture. And the same thing for Latin America. And there I worked with teachers in the foreign language department, Spanish teachers, although it was taught in English.
He also gave it the impetus to make students take the course because he helped with these field trips that we took. The overnight field trip that opened the West, where we went to see John Deere's home, and then we went to the Foundry, and we went to Star Rock, and we went to a nice little museum in Utica where the lady came out and said to this whole group in a little museum, feel free to pick up anything you like and look at it. And I gasped, and the students said, that's all right, she didn't know any better. But he had these field trips, and once the field trips were established, there was no problem getting people to take American Studies, because before that they had said it's too tough, you've got to read too much.
Well, that's interesting. Now, in social studies too, you would change the curriculum to meet the changing things that are going on in the world and the time periods. What are some of the courses that came and went while you guys were at Addison Trail in social studies?
For a while, the curriculum reflected some things that were happening nationally in social studies, sort of mini courses. So we would do one semester courses like street law. We taught street law for a couple, 3 years as a one semester course, and tried to have some different offerings like that. We broke up Western Civ into 4 mini courses about religion and government and economics and so forth, to look at it. So students might opt to try to take it for 1 quarter rather than a whole year, although I'm not sure that ever really worked real well schedule-wise.
Do you remember?
Well, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Dan was the originator of the Junior Research Project.
Yep.
And, you know, that's kind of, whether the students loved it or not, I will never know. I'm sure many did. But it was a great project, and I think you always tailored the topic to some things that were going on, you know, issues of the day and biographies and different things. I thought that was always a terrific collaboration.
A little bit of that went on in the English department too, where some of the classes were tailored as time went on, weren't there?
Not as much, not too much, because we did have Dick Myers, who was a traditionalist. And we did have a few elective courses. I spent a year with Contemporary Magazine, and we had a creative writing class, and we had, one year I think there was American drama. I'm not sure who taught it, but it didn't last long, and I think that teacher left, and then there was no more. But we did not do as much. We kept pretty much the freshman, sophomore, junior core program, and the electives were in the senior year.
Now, you came in 1966. You were mainly in physical education at the time. And you've got to have seen changes over the years in physical education. There's a picture here. We may have shown it already, but we can show it again. Was when you first opened up, you were teaching phys ed in the hallways down there. There's another picture with the uniforms. I don't know that we maybe show that very quickly because the girls might not be too excited to see that. But what are some things that you've seen different go on in the physical education area?
Well, I think things change like they did in other departments too, but it's the growth of and the split. It was girls' physical education and boys' physical education, and then it went to co-ed. And the same with athletics. I mean, I think Vic Lesh started when the girls used to have GAA, and then girls' athletics came in, and the team sports started, and training of coaches, and because basically at the start it was all men that were coaching, and then then men had to get into women and coaching the girls' sports, and so there was a lot of changes in that. But I mean, it's the communication, and nobody was pigeonholed, not only with physical education, but with any of the departments within the school, as you hear from English to social studies to everything else.
Well, and a lot of the
communicated.
coaches, like the coaches here,
Right.
they were from up in the academic departments, but they were down
Exactly.
late in. I know your predecessor, called Halka, he taught English and was very well liked as an English teacher, but he lived in Elburn, Illinois, and I can't imagine leaving a basketball game at the end of the evening, which sometimes went quite late, having to drive to Elburn, especially in the wintertime with basketball,
Yeah.
and then getting back up and driving back to Addison Trail the next morning. I mean,
He did.
he did.
Did it willingly, yeah.
And didn't they start bringing in a lot more life skills, things that you can carry on for in doing activities once you leave high school and on into to your career and so on?
Yes, I mean, it's just the growth of how you're changing and fitting into the society the way it is and what kids need. And I think that's the progressiveness of Addison Trail and how things changed and got better and better, and why everybody enjoyed it so much.
And any highlight that you want to bring up for, you've been fairly quiet here, which is unusual.
Highlight? Thanks. One of the highlights I thought, economics. I taught economics basically, and one year I called over to, McDonald's headquarters was over at Oak Brook, and I said, would you mind if I bring a class over there? And they said, no, bring them over. So we went over there, and Ray Kroc was alive at the time, and our class was sitting there, and Ray Kroc comes up and he said, would the class from Addison Trail stand up? And they thought that was the greatest thing in the world, And then they got a nice coupon, and we stopped at McDonald's on the way back, and everybody could eat at McDonald's on the corporation. They thought that was the greatest thing in the world.
Yeah, I would think they would. They probably wanted you to do that every semester after that. So are there any other tidbits or highlights that anybody would want to share about your years as a teacher at Addison Trail?
I guess we can look at changes that occurred over the years, but I think one of the things that occurred to me, because I taught a lot of times, I taught 11th graders U.S. history, and when I look back over the years, there also was a good deal of consistency. Those students at that point in life, for my whole career there, they were getting their driver's license that year. Many of them were getting their first jobs. they were doing several things kind of for the first time. Some of them were thinking about college kind of for the first time. And so while there were changes, certainly there were changes in the student body in regard to the ethnic elements in Addison. Lots of Greeks and Italians when I started there, and by the time I finished, a whole different set of ethnic groups in the community. But some of those things remain the same. And I think that's something to think about, that kids at the age of 17 or 16 are still kids at that age.
Right. Well, I remember working with you for a number of years. We had a career unit that the guidance department used to
yes.
work on. And we, at least in the guidance department, felt it was pretty important to at least get students to start thinking about what they're going to do with themselves once they got out of high school, which I think we had the course in the sophomore year, but it took a lot of time, and that was some negotiation with the English department. But as a teacher, what was it like to work with the students when the goal of that was to try and get them to think ahead to what they might want to do?
What you found was that it was difficult to get them out of fantasy into real life, and taking a newspaper and finding, because many, when they started saying they were going to go out and they were going to earn $50,000 and they were going to do this and they were going to buy this and all of that, you had to send them home and say, okay, find out your parents' salary and how much they make, how much mortgage payments are, what you can do, and then we'll take a newspaper and we'll look at what these jobs are advertising as paying, and then you figure out where you might be. And what I was finding was that was a little hard. You still ended up with some students who were going to be Major League Baseball players and weren't playing
Right.
baseball, but the realities were there. One of the things you had it was a values auction too.
Right.
And we had to pick what was the important things in your life. And whether it was family, whether it was money, whether it was prestige, success, and I auctioned them off. I think you were,
Yeah, I remember that was part of the unit.
yeah, it was something, and then we wrote a paper on what they bid on, what they
And why?
got, why they wanted it. I think one of the more interesting one was one student took his whole bundle to do whatever I want with no repercussions. And then his essay was he was going to take his driver's ed teacher and his math teacher and tie them to the bumper of his car and drive frontwards and backwards. I called him in and I talked to him. I said, "You aren't serious about doing anything, are you?" And he said, "No, but it sure felt good to write it."
Well, I know we run into people when we leave here you're making a transaction in a store someplace, and you know they recognize you. It's Addison Trail, and I think most of the time the students have a pretty positive remembrance of their days at Addison Trail and what the teachers did for them and what the teachers tried to do for them. And at times, they look back and say, at times I was a jerk, and I wish I wasn't that way all the time. And or Mrs. So-and-so. I remember Miss Pulliam in class mentioned this, and that's something I still think about today. So that's good. Well, I thank you again as a group. Anything else we want to add here?
Well, you're talking about that, and I still get together with two of them, my girls, track girls, Sharon
Okay.
Rodenhauser and Lisa Remy, for lunch and so on. And we go over some of the old times and the good times we had, and whatever.
I think so too, Burke, that we miss sometimes because of our age and the things that we've gone through. It's things like the medical careers program that was started that, you think about, you forget those things.
Right.
And it's also the...
In those days, as I recall, when I was going through the material for this, I look back and I do remember it. And later on, I'll bring up, I was with the blood drives, and they were involved. But for those days, medical careers was an area that was pretty avant-garde. It was pretty new
Oh, yeah.
and progressive. You know, actually teaching things. Now, we did do the industrial arts areas and so on to try and do some things that people could move on into a job. But in many of the other areas besides industrial arts, that was pretty new and exciting.
Well, I think also the special needs kids, how they were taken care of, and
Right.
they got into the work programs. So it covered the whole gamut, and I think that's just the way that the community was. That's the way Addison Trail as a community was.
Generally speaking, too, I think this is something that we as teachers at Addison Trail should be proud of. I'm sure there's kids that did have a difficult time and days that were difficult for them. But I think in general, the teachers were pretty aware of the students that had special needs. And when they were in their classroom or in their area, they took that into account to work with those kids and give them a positive experience.
One of my, I think, most touching memories of my time at Addison Trail was, I don't remember the circumstances of why it happened, but Governor Edgar came. And the whole student body was in the gym for this address. And members of the community came, and one of the special needs students got up in front of all those people, I think helped by Kim Chow and maybe some others, and addressed. And when that student finished, the whole gym got on their feet and applauded. And it was really a touching moment of how she was able to, that student was able to do that.
All right. Well, thanks again, and thanks for your work at Addison Trail and your years that you gave to Addison Trail.